That's it. You don't learn much from a weaker opponent other than you could beat them up. I might actually get my ass kicked. I better do something about it. Yeah, let's go. Like, I'm loving this. I'm also pretty tall, so I'm hard to reach for most guys, so it works. Hi, my name is Todd. I'm a professional MMA fighter. I've been fighting for 10 years, and I'm ready to answer some funny questions. How I got into MMA was actually, I was working as a landscaper, and I kept driving by this MMA gym, and I was like, you know what, I want to do this. I want to see this. At the time, the UFC was really blowing up. The Ultimate Fighter was on air all the time, so it was something I always watched, and I basically went in there and I told them I wanted to be a fighter. Next 2 weeks, I quit my job, and then I started working at the gym, and I trained for 2 months and had my first fight 2 months later. My mom was actually okay with it. It was my dad, believe it or not, that freaked out. So my mom came to my first fight. She was nervous. She watched the whole fight through her fingers, which is really funny. My dad refused to come because my dad's so protective of me. He couldn't handle the thought of a grown man beating me up and me not doing anything about it. So when I came home and I was like, hey, I won by knockout, he was so relieved, but it was actually my dad who was more nervous than my mom. If you're talented, you definitely need a coach, and this is why, and I live by this. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And when you're talented, it's very hard to motivate yourself because in your head, especially if you already have this thought of yourself that you're very talented and that you're better equipped than other people, it takes a coach to bring that humility and show you that, hey, you don't know everything. And actually funny that you asked that question, because I was like that first couple times. Was very athletic, very talented, but had no direction and had very little technique. And that's where coaches came in and helped me, and that's how I grew as an athlete. During fights, it's kind of like almost like you tap into like a primal mind. It's not, you're more thinking about technique, you're thinking about execution. I'm measuring distance, I'm thinking about what my feet are moving, everything all at the same time while working off of instinct. So you practice for weeks for this fight so that when it does come time, it's almost like muscle memory. You keep doing the stuff that you practice, the things that you game planned. And once you do that, then really and truly that's all you're thinking about. You're not really thinking about anything else. My best fight was in Montreal for TKO against a guy named Alain Badois. I hadn't fought for about 1.5 years, and he was a super talented guy going into this fight. He was heavily favored to win. He was athletic, and it was cool because it was kind of like fighting a younger me. Very athletic, lot of crazy spin moves and stuff like that, and it took not just my athleticism, but a very matured, smart mind to beat him. It was very much a chess battle, and that fight, I've gotten many knockouts, but that fight was my first submission, and it was beautiful. I personally have never tried doping myself. One of the things that I achieved when I was younger was I was able to change my body to grow to 265 pounds of solid muscle just by eating and by working out. I worked out like crazy. But so I thought, oh, and I slept a lot of rest. So for me, the reason why I never tried doping because I never really needed it. I've been one of those people that have been blessed enough to have longevity because of it, to have a natural strength and a work ethic that goes with that strength. So what I mean by is I work hard for it. Do I personally have anything against doping? Now, In a sport where they tell you you shouldn't and people doing it, then I have a problem. If everybody was doing it and the sport allowed it, then how could I have a problem with it? And that's my opinion on it. It's not, I don't believe that it's cheating or not cheating if it's with the rules. If it's part of the rules, then it's not cheating. But if it's against the rules, that's when I have a problem with it. Growing up, I played a lot of different sports. I was athletic, so I was pretty good at each individual sport. Problem is I was a little scattered. I played basketball, I played football, and I played hockey. I fell in love with hockey after I was playing basketball, before I started fighting, and I always wanted to play in the NHL. It's kind of funny because, you know, before my dream was to play in the NBA, and then I fell in love with hockey and to play the NHL. So for me, if I had to do anything else, if I had to change anything else other than MMA, I think I would probably like to play either professional basketball or professional hockey. It's really like a toss-up between those two. MMA was one of those sports where when I decided to get involved into it, it was becoming big. There was no draft needed. There was no politics like hockey is or basketball is, where you have to go through, say, college, or you have to go through certain teams. This was a very much, even though it's a team sport, it's an individual performance sport. So you need a team to get ready, but individually you perform. So it all lays on you, on what you do. So, I mean, when I started MMA, the hardest part was finding organizations, especially because it wasn't legal in Ontario, but it was in Montreal. So being able to travel to different places and compete and make money as a pro doing it, it made it a lot easier to transition into this professional sport, as opposed to, say, for example, at 25, trying to play hockey or trying to play basketball, when most guys don't start when they're 25. They've already entered drafts or farm teams when they're like 18. Training, discipline in training, getting up every day, doing the things that are needed to be done, being conscious of what you're doing, so you don't get injured, of course. Mentally, it is a little bit more difficult. Mentally, what happens is, for me personally, I have to enter a place of where I have less feeling and more logic, more focus, which can be difficult, because what happens is I'm always at a stage of conflict. To prepare for conflict, I'm always in conflict with my own self. So I'm always thinking about what needs to be done, how to do it. I am putting myself in a lonely place. I'm detached from the people that I love and care about more. My face may be smiling, but my head is always thinking about fighting. I immerse myself into fights, fight culture, conflict. I look at a lot of fight videos, stuff like that. Things to always prepare yourself and get yourself involved in it. Remember, this is different, right? Mentally, someone's telling you, hey, you're going to fight on this date. It's not like instinct, spur of the moment, you have to defend yourself. You know you are going to make that walk to go fight. So to do so, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So you have to be comfortable with conflict. And for human beings, it's a toss-up, right? Some are, some aren't. But even if you are or you're not comfortable with it, it has to become, just like training, it has to become a habit. It has to become something that you work on, so that you are able to make that walk uncomfortably but comfortably. See what I'm saying? And with confidence that you're ready for whatever is to come, and that you've accepted what is to come, and that you are in control of what is to come. What hurts after a fight all depends kind of like what happened during the fight. And sometimes you never know what it is. Like one fight, I remember I was like, ow, like my thigh hurts. And I'm thinking, why does my thigh hurt? I don't remember it being hurt or hit. And then you go back and you watch the video and you're like, I got kneed there, right? So it's weird. You don't really feel things during the fight. After the fight, I mean, like even like right after the fight, your adrenaline's still going. The doctor's checking you, pushing this, prodding this, and you're like, yeah, doc, I'm fine. Especially if you won, you got a natural high, you're feeling good. You're like, yeah, you know. And then everything simmers down and calms down, and you know, you're sitting there, and then you're just like, I'm gonna move something, and this hurts, that hurts. So it really depends on how the fight goes. Me personally, I have less injuries to the face because I don't really get punched in the face, so I try not to. And I'll have more injuries, more like, you know, like body type, stuff like that. And I'm also pretty tall, so I'm hard to reach for most guys, so it works. So for me, I would rather fight a stronger opponent than a weaker opponent, and I'll tell you why. I got into fighting to compete, to test myself, to better myself, to elevate the person that I feel that I was and who and still potentially who I could and where I could be. If you don't challenge yourself, you never know where you stand. I think with fighting, especially with MMA fighting, there has become, at one point there was a very big saturation of people who thought it was really cool to be fighters. And didn't mind fighting weaker opponents, guys that had less experience, stuff like that. For me, that's not a real hunt. That's not what this is about. I'm not looking to be the best fighter in the world. I'm looking to fight and win against the best fighters in the world. The titles and the stuff that comes with it, that doesn't appeal to me. What appeals to me is the challenge, is the competition. If I fight a guy who's up here and I'm projected to be down here, but I bring a game that's even higher, and then all of a sudden what happens is that you see where you are, you see what's working, you see what works for you, but more so it's the validation that I belong here, and this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It's like the universe giving you something and saying, this is where you're supposed to be right now in your life, and this is what you're supposed to be doing. If you're fighting for a local promotion, okay, and you are an up-and-coming fighter, say for example you had maybe 1 or 2 fights where you've won those fights, you're still making like bottom range, maybe like 2,000, maybe 1,000, stuff like that. It's very low pay. The guys that make the top in this business, they are on the biggest stages, and it's more than just fighting. They're not just being successful at fighting, they're good at branding, marketing. People want to see them, hate them or love them, people want to see them. They either want to see them win or they want to see them lose. Really what happens with fighters paid all depends on a couple things, and I'll get you through it. First, how long you've been fighting and what your record is. How entertaining you are. If you're entertaining, if you're just boring, if you're just a boring fighter, people aren't going to pay to see you. If you're knocking people out, or on the opposite end, you fight big and then sometimes you get finished, then people are like, oh, I want to see this fight, because you know this person is going to come in and put on a show. The promotion, you got to make sure you have a promotion that has enough money to support certain fighters and their show and stuff like that. And when they have enough to support their show, you know they're going to have enough to support the fighter, right? They put effort into their show, they put effort into their brand, so they're going to put effort into their fighters so that their fighters can do the same thing. That's what Brave does with us right now, which is really exciting. Also too, which is really big, is how well you perform inside and outside of the cage. And what I mean by that is, do you do a lot of outreach? Do you do a lot of stuff for fans? You know what I mean? Do fans like you? Do they not like you? Stuff like that. Because what happens is that fans end up purchasing tickets, buying merchandise. Organizations see that how many fans you bring to the sport. Even like, and I say this, even if they don't like you, they still want to pay to see you, which they still have to pay to see you, and they still want to pay to see whoever fight you. So that's really what it is. It's about your worth inside and outside of the cage. MMA is comprised of a lot of different martial arts. There's a lot of people from different martial art backgrounds that come into it. Boxing, Muay Thai or kickboxing, Wrestling, jiu-jitsu seem to be the most popular. There's also, you got people that do sambo that are very good. You have people that come and do, for example, that used to do taekwondo, stuff like that. I think with as long as you have a good mix of striking mixed with ground, I think that with MMA, someone could do very well. Right now in MMA, a lot of the guys that are dominating are the guys with a wrestling background. The wrestling is very strong because it allows you to dictate whether you take someone down or whether they hold you down, standing someone up, and also close range combat is very key because it starts standing up, but for the most part, it always ends up on the ground. If you're going to start training on anything, especially, I wouldn't necessarily suggest MMA right away. What I would suggest is doing an individual martial art such as boxing, try one striking, and then maybe say jiu-jitsu or wrestling, try one grappling, and then learn each one individually and start learning the basics of each one. It's kind of like learning to crawl before you learn to walk. MMA is not a martial art per se. MMA is a sport. It's a combination of martial arts. It's prize fighting, basically. To learn each individual martial art, or take your time to learn each individual martial art, what MMA does is, for example, it brings it all together and it helps you to build your own style. How do you bring it all together? What is your strength? Maybe striking is your strength. So maybe your jiu-jitsu or your wrestling is to be able to stay on the feet or get back up. Maybe your strength is grappling. So your striking is used to set up so there's opportunities for takedowns and so on and so forth. You won't know that just by doing MMA because what happens is it's so mixed up, there's no direction. What you need to do is you need to kind of find your niche, find your thing. And there's certain people that are just good at everything, which you still have to be able to focus on first learning how to strike, learning your foot positioning, and then you can learn how to put it all together. The reason I wanted to be a pro MMA fighter was I wanted to be able to get paid to compete. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to see different places, different cultures. I am entertaining a lot of people, which I enjoy, I love it. The love I get back from it, the people that tell me I inspire them and that, you know, I like that feeling. It makes me feel good as a human being, as a person. It makes me want to work harder. When you get somebody that tells you, hey man, like, you inspire me, and they mean it, and it comes from the heart. That's the kind of stuff that is really rewarding. It's funny, people would think it's about getting hit. They would think getting hit is probably the thing that you would hate the most. It's not. I would rather take a punch than deal with all the people that shit talk. That's what I don't like. I get it if you're fighting somebody and you don't like them and you guys have a banter back and forth, but now the sport's gotten so much where people are just talking just to get fans into it and stuff like that. And you know, then there's people who never fought a day in their life will just say the worst things about a fighter, say they're no good, stuff like that, and not understanding the sport. That's probably one of the things I hate the most, worse than getting punched. That, hold on, I'm not done. That and the judges. I can't stand judges. And the reason why I can't stand judges is because more times than not, the people judging the fight are people that have never been in a fight. And they're judging you based on a score sheet of what they think should be, say, a more dominant performance than another fighter. So that's why I never like leaving things in the judges. And for me, I do my talking with my fists more than my mouth when it comes to fighting. A lot of us, what happens is we get into a sport because we want the competition, and that's good. Having that fire is good. But take your time to learn what you're doing. What things can you learn today? What, if it's one technique, what can you learn today? Don't think about the fight. Don't think about things that aren't here yet. You have an opportunity right now for an hour, hour and a half to see what you can retain right now, what you can learn right now. Add that to your arsenal so that when you do go to war, your weapons are sharp and you have an options that you can use, as opposed to being like, go to training, thinking about the fight. Now the fight's here. Now, oh, I forgot everything I learned in training. Don't let the pressures of other people dictate what you do. And that's the hardest thing, is people expect this from you. You are gonna expect a lot out of yourself. First thing to expect out of yourself is to learn. And I think as a younger fighter, I wish I had that advice. I rushed a lot, and I think that's why that's one of the first things I tell people is take your time, learn, experience, have fun. So effing awesome.